Under a Trump administration, I recommend you act instead of react. If your candidate didn't win, don't sit around reacting. You ought to act. And I'm going to empower you in this video how to do that, how you can capitalize on the market growth, because Trump is a businessman. He understands economics better than most politicians. The market is going to grow. In fact, the market surged the day after the election. Why? Well, if you don't understand, you need to watch this episode, because you ought to take advantage of this, but protect yourself for when the market goes south again someday. Get ready. So I'm Doug Andrew. I've been a financial strategist and retirement planning specialist now for 5 decades, helping thousands of Americans optimize their assets, minimize taxes, and empower their authentic wealth. In college, I majored in economics, and it's amazing how many people do not understand economics, and many of them are politicians, okay? This is not a political video, but you need to understand a few things. And so now that we know the results of the election, and if your candidate didn't win, don't sit around and react. You need to act. Now, what do we know? Okay. We know that Trump is a Republican. What does that mean? If you don't know the answer to that, you better learn, okay? Generally speaking, the Democrat philosophy, and I'm not saying which one is right now. I'm just telling you the difference. The Democrat philosophy is we want bigger government. Let's have the government do more and more and more, and have more regulations. And we're going to need tax revenue, so let's raise taxes. Generally speaking, that's their tax policy philosophy. The Republican philosophy is, well, let's have less government, let's cut government waste, and let's pass it to the states or whatever, less federal government overreach or whatever. But if we need tax revenue still for the federal programs, the best way is to raise the revenue that's being taxed. And so if you look at American history for decades, you can tell who was in control of the executive branch and or Congress based upon the tax laws that were passed, whether taxes were lowered or raised, okay? It's basically, it's very obvious if you've never done that. So we know now that Trump is going to stimulate the economy. He's going to raise the revenue that's being taxed, okay? So how can you capitalize on the market growth? Wall Street responded instantly with the market going 1,000 points the day after the election. Well, did you miss out? Folks, I'm going to show you how to not miss out when the market goes up, but also how not to lose when the market goes down. This is using a strategy called indexing. It's my favorite strategy that I have employed for years. And that's why my favorite financial vehicle is indexed universal life. My money is not at risk in the market. So first of all, let me show you a graph that illustrates this difference. So I started as a financial strategist clear back in 1974. Let's say the year after that, in 1975, if I invested $500,000 one time in the market, in the stock market, in the S&P 500, yes, I go through I used to describe the stock market as like a person with a yo-yo. Hopefully walking up some stairs, but you're going up and down and what have you. This is the red. Oh, wow. The 1990s were going up. And I have people out there saying, why? Why would you want to give up on this upswing in the market? Because I want to miss out on the loss of all the money I made here by having my money in the market. Okay. And so the red line is the S&P 500. This is 2001 to 2003. This is 2008. And at the end of 2010, you would have ended up with 5.6 million. Not bad, okay? But that's before tax, if it's a traditional IRA or 401k. What's this green line? Indexing. Indexing, where you may not make as much money when the market goes up, you're capped, but you don't lose. You don't lose. You may not make anything, but you don't lose when the market goes down. You would have ended up with 8 million in the same 35-year period. My question to you is, would you like to go through that roller coaster ride with a lot of heartburn during the down years, trying to time when you're going to retire, to end up with 5.6 million before tax, and after paying tax, you only have 3.8 million. Or would you like to more than double that? Eliminate the heartburn, the roller coaster ride, not lose when the market goes down, and end up with 8 million, tax-free. Now, whenever I show this to audiences, they go, duh, I want this one. This is indexing, okay? This is money in the market. That's what I'm talking about. Now, how are you able to do this? Why is it tax-free? If you've watched very many of my videos, my favorite financial vehicle, without question, is a property structured, max-funded, indexed universal life. And it's a tax-free cash cow protected in the Internal Revenue Code under 3 sections of the code for more than a century in one form or another. It's the only financial instrument in the Internal Revenue Code that accumulates your money tax-free. That's provided under Section 72E of the Internal Revenue Code. Section 7702 dictates how you can access your money totally income tax-free. Every $1 million can generate a 10% payout, $100,000 a year of tax-free income into perpetuity. And at the end of the day, when I die, anything I leave behind is transferred income tax-free, and it usually blossoms. It increases in value. You leave behind more than what was in there. Roths don't do that. I don't know of any other investment vehicle that does that. That's under Section 101A of the Internal Revenue Code. So I've taught advanced continuing education to CPAs and tax attorneys for years. I've always challenged them, show me any other investment vehicle in America in the Internal Revenue Code that does that. And they've yet to show it to me. Now, if you know the history behind this, E.F. Hutton was the brainchild behind the emergence of universal life and now indexed universal life. In 1980, they said, wow, what are we thinking? The multi-trillion-dollar insurance industry is the backbone of America, is the backbone of the world. They have weathered the Great Depression with flying colors. In the Great Depression, banks closed. 40% never reopened their doors again. Some real estate in the Great Depression dropped 80%. There wasn't one single legal reserve insurance company in America that went under in the Great Depression. They came through with flying colors, crediting 2.5%, 3.5% interest. What about 2008? Now, most people in America had no clue how close we were to a total financial collapse in America in 2008. David Walker, the Comptroller General of the General Accountability Office, resigned because the Obama administration wouldn't let him tell the public the truth. And so the federal government, when 400 banks went under in 2008 and 900 more were on the watch list, they were on the brink of going under, the federal government asked the 5 major banks in America to disclose where they had their Tier 1 assets for liquidity and safety. Where was it? 30 to 40% of their Tier 1 assets was invested in insurance companies, mostly in BOLI, bank-owned life insurance. What? Yeah, they own life insurance on who? People, their boards of directors, their stockholders, whatever, okay? Corporations did it on COLI, corporate-owned life insurance. That's where I had my corporate assets. Why? Because banks in 2008 were paying a measly 1% or less. Every $1 million that they borrowed of OPM, other people's money they deposited in banks, the banks only had to pay 1% on that a year. That's $10,000. They turned around and put that money in insurance companies and earned 5% without even linking to an index. How much more is 5 than 1? Don't say 4. They were making 50 grand. Would you hire an employee for 10 grand that made you an extra 50 grand? That's called a 500% return on employment costs. It's a 400% profit, but 500% return. You can't believe how many people don't get this. But see, the banks were borrowing money and making 4 to 5 times what they were paying. I was doing the same thing. I was borrowing money at a net cost of 2.5 and making 10. I was making 400%. The banks were. We were both happy. You can't believe how many Americans don't understand that concept. But let's get back to why E.F. Hutton came up with this idea in the 1980s. They simply said, why don't we take the least amount of insurance we can get away with and put in the most money, the most premium the IRS allows as fast as they allow, and this thing will turn into a tax-free cash cow to be used for living benefits. This will knock the socks off of having money in the market in an IRA or 401k, and it does. And so there was this massive exodus of money leaving the banks, the brokerage firms, and the credit unions into these because they were safer. They paid higher interest. They were tax-free. They blossomed when you died. Well, then the IRS took E.F. Hutton to court. E.F. Hutton won. They weren't doing anything wrong. The IRS basically said, well, who puts $500,000 into a dinky little life insurance policy? And E.F. Hutton said, our clients do, because they're not doing it for the death benefit. They're doing it for the living tax-free accumulation and income. Oh, so the IRS said, we think you're overstepping your bounds. You're exceeding what we intended under the definition of tax-free insurance over here. And so they went to Congress and said, we got to change the definition of tax-free. So they did in 1982, 1984, and 1988. These are tax citations, TEFRA, DEFRA, and TAMRA. They're actually acronyms that stand for Tax Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982, the Deficit Reduction Act of 1984. That basically dictated the minimum amount of death benefit that had to be attached to the universal life insurance contract so that it stayed tax-free under this definition. If you violated TEFRA and DEFRA, it moved from tax-free over to another section of the Internal Revenue Code, taxable investments. The IRS said investments are taxed sooner or later if it's tax-deferred IRA, 401k. Investments are subject to market volatility. I was fine with that. If that's their definition of an investment, I don't want one of those. I want tax-free insurance. I don't care if I can't call it an investment. It's sort of ridiculous. What would you call something that makes you 10% rates of return and every $1 million can generate $100,000 a year of tax-free income? Well, you can't call it an investment, but when I ask people, what would you call something that does that? They say a miracle. Yeah. So TEFRA and DEFRA dictated the minimum amount of insurance, but they give it parity, meaning it doesn't matter how old you are or how unhealthy you are, you can squeeze down the death benefit required by the IRS so that your rate of return is the same. Throughout, ever since 1980, my clients have averaged a little over 11% and netted cash on cash over 10%. Their money doubles about every 7.2 years. Every $1 million can generate $100,000 a year of tax-free income, and you can learn how and why in my book. But folks, that's because I comply with TEFRA and DEFRA, but it doesn't matter if you're like a friend of our family, a 78-year-old who came to me back in the 1980s. He had 3 blocked arteries, adult onset diabetes, a prostate cancer episode, 6 sisters, all predeceased him, and 3 brothers. So you would think he had a foot in the grave, but he got approved, but table D, meaning he had to pay twice as much for the insurance that the IRS required that most 78-year-olds would do. He had the life expectancy of an 83-year-old, not a 78-year-old. TEFRA and DEFRA allowed us to squeeze down the death benefit. He was able to earn 11% and net 10. He put in $500,000 and generated $50,000 a year of tax-free income, just as if he was a 22-year-old athletic marathon running female. He got the same rate of return as a 22-year-old female because he got away with less insurance because he was older and unhealthy. His objective was rate of return. You wouldn't believe how many people do not understand what I just said. It gave parity, meaning equality, if your objective is rate of return. TAMRA is the Technical and Miscellaneous Revenue Act of 1988. The banks and brokerage firms could not compete, so they wanted to slow the flow of money going over. They hated to see $500,000 going in one fell swoop out of their bank over to these. So they said, well, we don't want to kill these. Why? This is where they put their money. They wanted to just slow the flow, make it so that people have to spread out the $500,000 that they're taking out of our bank over a 4 or 5 year period, okay? So this is TAMRA. So if you want tax-free income, I compare it metaphorically to a bucket. And so a bucket, an IUL, You're taking the least amount of insurance you can get away with and putting the most premium the IRS allows, and you're putting it as fast as you can under TAMRA. So under these TEFRA and TAMRA tax citations shown down here, if I had a 60-year-old male that wanted to reposition $500,000 to increase the liquidity, safety, rate of return, and tax benefits over where he has it in his IRAs or 401ks or whatever, I can get away with as little as $1 million or even a little less than $1 million of life insurance. He could buy way more life insurance than that. That's not his objective. Now, when he puts in $500,000, he might be able to put in $125,000 the first day of the first year, another $125,000 the first day of the second year. So 1 year and 1 day into this, he's got it 50% funded. But in 3 years and 1 day, or for sure in 4 installments, he's now got his $500,000 in there. But see, the net amount at risk is the difference between his money and this. If he dies, this is what they pay out, but $500,000 was his own money. That's a good thing. Why? Because they're only charging him for the difference between his money and the death benefit. They're only charging him, the spigot on the bucket, for the remaining net amount at risk. This $500,000 at 9.6% return is going to double in about 7.5 years to $1 million. Many of my clients by year 10 and a half, 11 years in, their cash value grows to equal the death benefit. How much is the cost of insurance now? 0. Now, technically, if they die, the insurance company has to pay out about 5% more than that, $1,050,000. But the insurance company is only charging him for $50,000 of actual net amount at risk. The interest he's earning on $1 million dwarfs the cost of insurance on 1/20th of what he used to pay for when he started it. This is like buy term, invest the difference on steroids. You're self-insured within a decade, okay? So this is the magic, but going back full swing here, the money in here, you're capitalizing when the market goes up. So let's come back full swing. Under a Trump administration, how can you capitalize on market growth? By owning one of these. If I have $1 million in one of these and I feel bearish about America, which I would have felt if Kamala Harris would have won the election, even if I voted for her, I have to face the truth. We would have headed into a recession because she was going to immediately raise taxes, tax unrealized capital gains, and so forth. Okay, that's their philosophy. It's just the facts. And so I would have said, you know what? I'll just settle for the general account portfolio rate. Now, I've earned as high as 15% on that. I'll take the lowest I've ever been credited, 4%. This is what the insurance companies are earning on their general account portfolio, their money invested in AAA and AA bonds and mortgages on skyscrapers and shopping malls and what have you. So I could just settle for 4% tax-free or $40,000 instead of losing money during a downturn in the market. Now, if I feel bullish about America, now I know that Trump won. Okay, the economy is going to boom here for a while. So now I will link my return. So what do? I relinquish the 4% interest staying in there. And I say to the insurance company, you can take the interest on my $1 million and fund an options budget to buy upside options. They're big boys and girls. They're the number one purchaser of options in the world. They buy them hourly. So now if they invest $40,000 in options, let's say in the S&P 500, if that's the one I chose, and the S&P is up 8% the next year, they'll pay me $80,000. How can they afford to do that? Because the $40,000 of options doubles to $80,000. If you don't understand options, you need to learn something here. If it goes up 12%, they can pay me $120,000 because they have the $120,000 because of the options. But if the market tanks, someday it will tank again. The options expire worthless. The $40,000 is gone. My $1 million isn't gone. I still kept my $1 million. If I would have had the $1 million in the market and the market dropped 40% like 2008, you would have lost $400,000. Our clients didn't lose a dime in 2008 with IUL. They were going, go, 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 because they weren't losing a dime. And the first 90 days of 2009, most of our clients locked in gains of 16% tax-free after not losing a penny. So my advice to you is, knowing the results of the election, if you want to capitalize on market gains, take advantage of this. One last point. One of my favorite little laws my good friend Richard Rossi came up with is, when there's anxiety, there's opportunity. Did you hear that? March of 2020, a lot of anxiety. Why? COVID-19. So much so that the market dropped 30% in a single month. Opportunity! Most people panicked. We contacted 800 of our clients who had IUL and said, switch to a threshold strategy for 1 year. What's a threshold strategy? That's where you link to an index and there is no cap. The trade-off is they will subtract like 5% off of the return at the end by not having any cap, and they buy options appropriately. We usually don't use that because if we're averaging 12%, which we are, we would only be netting 7. We would rather earn 12 and net 11. But every once in a while, when there's anxiety, there's opportunity. The chance that the market was going to be up substantially was worth having 5% off of the top at the end of a year. Sure enough, 1 year later, in March of 2021, the market was up 66.33%. Minus 5, that's a net of 61.33%. We had a client with $852,000 in his IUL, his L.A.S.E.R fund. He got credited in one 12-month period, 61.33%. He was one of the 800 clients that got that. That $852,000 made $535,000 in 1 year. At the end of the year, he had $1,387,000. If the market would have crashed the next year, he would not have lost one dime of the $500,000 he made the year before because it's locked in. He may not have made anything the next year, but he wouldn't have lost the $500,000 he made the year before. That's indexing. This is how you capitalize on the market growth that is going to happen during the Trump administration, but still protect yourself when the market takes a downturn. Don't miss out. Folks, if you want to learn more about indexing, claim a copy of this book, The L.A.S.E.R Fund. It's my most recent best-selling book. It's flying off of our warehouse shelves. It retails on Amazon for $20 up to $60. If you buy it on Amazon, thank you, but I'll gift you a copy free. I do require a little bit of skin in the game. If you go to laserfund.com or click on the link below, you contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling, okay? And then I'll cover the rest of that cost, and I'll pay for the book. I'll fire out a hard copy to you via priority mail, and while you're in there claiming your free copy, if you'd like to listen and learn or watch and learn, there's those formats also available for a nominal investment. But folks, it's not about me, this is about you. If you like the charts, graphs, and numbers, read this one. This is actually 2 books in one. This side is 200 pages of charts and graphs and explanations if you're a left brain learner. If you're a right brain learner, you learn more by stories and examples, you flip it over and read this book. This one is about 100 pages, 12 chapters with 62 actual stories, okay? If you want to use your whole brain, read both of these books, okay? But this is an opportunity I don't want you to miss out on. Now we know the results of the election. Don't sit around reacting. I suggest you act and explore how to participate during the upswing in the market that we're going to see during the next 4 years.